bakers, florists, anyone working in a wedding related industry. What is your best Bridezilla story? Worked at a reception venue. One event really sticks out. Everything went well until the cake. Bride and groom go to feed each other. She does it very nice. He smashes it into her face. Bride screams, starts bawling her eyes out and runs out of the hall. 15 or so minutes later, the father of the bride comes and asks the DJ for the mic. He proceeds to thank everyone for coming and says that if they would like to take their gifts on the way out, the couple has decided to break up. I'm sure there were issues leading up to the event, but the bride had told everyone, including the groom, that if he smashed the cake in her face, it was over. She wasn't lying. As silly as it is, I kinda admire her follow through. I worked as a wedding photographer for many years. My favorite story is of a bride who was having a huge wedding where her parents lived across the country from where she lived. By huge, I mean 22 people in the wedding party. They had to rent 2 limos to hold them all. The bride and her girls started drinking heavily at 8 AM, with champagne while getting their hair and make done. They followed 4 bottles of bubbly with a bottle of whiskey to help them get dressed. I honestly stopped paying attention at that point, but the pace didn't slow down. By 11 AM the bride is lit and pee. She came down to the reception area where the florist, the best local florist and a lady I worked with regularly, was creating the centerpieces. They were large glass cylinders with lights and glass balls at the bottom, filled with flowers and then water. Bridezilla decided that the lights weren't buried deep enough in the glass balls, and made the florist pour out and recreate about 10 of these things. She was a real bee about it too, yelling at the florist and carrying on about 1/4 of glass beads less or more. After she stumbled down the aisle to her less drunk groom, I tried to do formal photos. Bridezilla wasn't having any of my posing. Oh no, she had her own ideas of what would look good. I shot them anyway. It's what the customer wanted, right? She was so drunk and belligerent, honestly I just wanted the session to end. There were 22 people in the party. It wasn't going to be short no matter what I did. Some of the shots were outside, at a local golf course. It started to sprinkle after a few frames. Bridezilla made a beeline for the limo so her hair wouldn't get ruined. By the midpoint of the reception, her brand new husband was apologizing for her. If you are apologizing for the behavior of the woman you married 3 hours ago, you're doing it wrong. When I delivered the photos, you could hear her screaming 2,000 miles away. The posing sucked. The lighting sucked. She wanted more stuff at the golf course. Basically, everything she had told me she wanted, she complained about, threatened not to pay, etc. After tons of angst on my part, I figured out that her primary problem was that she didn't have good bridal portraits to put on her walls. I agreed to comp her a bridal photo session the next time they were in town. The best part? When she came in for the bridal session, she was sober and a different person. Sweet, helpful, listened and posed perfectly. The photos came out looking like $1 million. She was thrilled with them, paid in full, and even referred a couple of her friends my way. TLDR. Don't let alcohol release the inner bee on your wedding day. You'll regret it, but not as much as your new husband will. This is something that every married person should instill in every soon-to-be married person. Don't get drunk at your own wedding. My wife and I had 1 or 2 drinks each at our wedding. That's it. We had a freaking blast. I simply cannot understand why people want to spend upwards of $30,000 for a party, then get wasted, don't remember a thing, or worse, ruin it. I worked at a bridal clothing store for about a year in high school. The only story that really stands out is more about the mother of the bride than the bride. One day a bride and her mother come in the store looking for a bridal gown. I approached them and things immediately started going downhill. The mother and daughter were on completely different wavelengths and I could hardly get a word in over their loud bickering. I finally was able to get a word in and discover that her wedding is in a few months and has to find a dress, like yesterday. This just adds to the tension because it takes several months to get a dress in and altered. So basically we need to find a dress off the rack. Thank gosh she fit into the sample sizes. Anyways, every dress she tries on her mother comments in a negative way. That dress makes you look hippie. That dress looks too cheap. Lace isn't your thing. That dress makes you look like a S. Just reaming her daughter. Eventually the bride breaks down and starts crying and I have to go console her as best I could. Remember, I'm still only 17 trying to comfort a grown woman at least 10 years my senior. Finally she finds a dress that she and her mother can agree upon. We go to pay for it and the mother insists her daughter wears a new dress. I explain it's going to be a close call on shipping and everything, but she insists her daughter won't wear a dirty dress. I order the dress and the mother calls every day for months asking about the dress, in varying degrees of discourteousness. Thankfully the dress made it in time, but our alterations lady was working up until the day of the bride's wedding to finish it. The bride had her final fitting at her venue all because her mother made her dress experience so awful she waited until the last possible minute to buy a dress. Oh, and the mother never thanked the alterations lady for rushing to finish the dress. Thank goodness the daughter was very polite and sent us a card thanking us for what we had done for her and for putting up with her mother. Weddings can make people totally insane. My mom wasn't nearly as bad as that, but she is normally an incredibly sweet and polite woman, and I actually had to take her aside when we were talking to a florist and tell her that she needed to control herself and that she was being pretty rude. It was insane because she just isn't like that. I dunno. I worked as a caterer and a wedding DJ for about 15 years. Here goes. I was DJing a wedding in a shabby little reception hall out in the middle of the sticks for a redneck bride and groom. The bride was wasted by the time I started playing my set, around 8 PM. She came up to me right away and told me that I need to play the song Save a Horse Ride a Cowboy like every 4 songs, and I tried to tell her that it's a bad idea but she insisted, so I agreed. About an hour into the night I play the song for the 10th time and people in the crowd start to boo. Please note that every time I played the song I passed it off onto the bride by saying something like it's time for a special request from the bride as not to destroy my reputation. So people boo and start walking off the dance floor. Bride sees this and loses her crap. She runs up to the stage and demands the mic. "You dumb mother suckers, get back on this dance floor or this freaking thing is done," she wailed into the mic. Her guests ignore her. She yells again and no one pays her any attention. She then marches over to the cake and gift table and flips it over, yelling, "Everyone get the frick out of my wedding." Her guests, who did not seem all that surprised, end up leaving. I still get paid, so in the end it did not matter too much from my end, but wow. Just wow. One lucky guy. I worked in alterations at a chain bridal store for a couple years. The amount of crap I saw go down was ridiculous. But one of my favorite stories was the bride who refused to let me fit her in her gown because I have short hair and didn't want to be touched by a disgusting lesbian. First I laughed her off because I thought she was just making a poor joke in poor taste, but then when I tried to help her into the gown, she started freaking out and made a huge fuss. The mom got involved and threatened to have me fired for trying to violate her daughter. When I assured her that I am, in fact, straight, she insisted I have my manager come out and vouch for my orientation. Finally, I put her in the dress and she bursts into tears and starts screaming at me about how I made her dress too tight and how she looked fat and terrible in it. And I just looked at her and said, "Mom, I haven't altered your dress yet. This is a first fitting to see what sort of alterations need to be done." Justice. Worked for a catering company owned by my friend's mother for a summer. Bride wants a buffet style service and she chooses about a dozen different dishes plus sides and 2 different salads. Price isn't an option, so she picks some pretty nice stuff. We did a few types of fish, bacon wrapped fillets, grilled and fried chicken and various other fun stuff like mussels and clams. She had over 200 people at her wedding, so we cooked up a feast and it was presented beautifully. The food was great. We tried everything, obviously, before putting it out. Everything went perfectly. We were a pretty small company, so this was a big deal for us. Anyways, about an hour into the reception, a few bridesmaids are wasted. The bridegroom are decently drunk, but nowhere near the maids. One of them loses it and starts puking in the bushes. There are enough people there and enough going on at the time that it didn't cause a scene. No one was really paying attention, and the bridesmaid who puked did it pretty nonchalantly. The bride flipped the frick out. She automatically assumed it was the food, not the alcohol, that caused her friend to vomit. She stands up and screams, "Nobody eat the food. You'll get sick." I calmly approached the bride, as best as I could, with a coworker and explained that the food was fine and that people would not get sick. She wasn't having it. She took an empty pitcher that we used to serve water in, dunked it in the swimming pool, and proceeded to drown the food trays with chlorinated water, thus ruining everything. She then made a bigger scene by personally clearing everyone's plate, despite people telling her to sit down and relax. She was crying hysterically. Her deadbeat new husband did nothing, just sat there and watched. We ended up leaving with only the deposit. She refused to pay us the rest. We took her to court and she won. She tried to countersue the company but lost. I left after that summer and vowed to never work in the service industry again. I work at a reception venue. Once had a bride snort see off the bridal table, then found her new husband in another room with a bridesmaid. Was the most interesting work shift ever. She threw her shoe through the window. She threw her shoe through the window. Honestly, it feels like the logical reaction. Before I got into catering, I worked at an art museum which also hosted a lot of really schmancy weddings. Big, beautiful old building that was very expensive to rent, so it hosted a lot of six-figure weddings, some of which were more tasteful than others. One of my first brides was a girl who loved the building but hated the wall color. At the time, the interior was painted a beautiful but very bright color. She was obsessed. For months she tried to get me to have the walls repainted white. Nope. The day of the wedding rolls around and in an effort to downplay the wall color, she has made everything black. Tablecloths, chairs, bridesmaid dresses, everything. She also had these purple flashing LED flower vases that were pretty horrible. Her DJ was a prick and played a bunch of songs that are hilariously inappropriate for weddings. Shorts, big pimping, that sort of thing. Everyone got S-faced. We had to kick the maid of honor out of the museum after we caught her trying to steal a bottle of liquor from the bar. The saddest thing, right after dinner, the bride and groom's crotchety Asian parents hopped in the limo intended for the bride and groom, rode back to the hotel, and didn't come back. The limo never resurfaced either. I had to watch the bride try to dump her plastered husband in the back of a cab while her useless bridesmaids just stood there and laughed. Ouch. I also had a client who was the daughter of a filthy rich international hotel mogul. They spent so much money that it felt vulgar, even by our standards. Custom one-time use silk linens, rose pomanders several feet around, that sort of thing. It was the one event I've done where instead of admiring my fellow vendors' skills and artistry, I just felt icky, like I could hear the screams of thousands and thousands of dying flowers. There is a point where something can be used up to create something valuable or useful. The plants are killed to create a beautiful work of art, for instance. On the other hand, there's a point where it's just being done to flaunt their excess, and any sacrifice involved just seems wasted. Bartended at a venue that was formerly a church, lots of weddings. Also was a live music venue. Had Deadmore CTC play there, so there is a large security staff that works the events as needed. This is important as this wedding was being worked by Charles and Kendall, two very nice, very large black guys who usually worked hop nights. Wiry little redneck father of the bride gets smushed on Jim Beam and somehow gets it into his head that one or both of the security guys has been stealing presents and very loudly starts accusing them of the same in a medium-sized meeting dressing room adjacent to the reception. Crap got real when he put his index finger into Kendall's chest and calls him boy while calling him a freaking thief. In space of a second I see Kendall weigh the cost benefits of beating this man badly in front of his family, definitely losing a part-time job and possibly getting arrested. Somehow he decides to not beat him to death, but the dad won't drop it. He calls the police and the manager part owner stops the reception then and there, kicks everyone out and charges the family full price for everything, which totaled over $20,000. It was pretty sweet. I love when you can see the thoughts going through someone's head just by watching their face body language. You just sit there and go, oh crap, it's about to get real. About the mother of the groom, but I'll tell it anyway. I'm 20 years old and for some reason I take a job off Craigslist to work as a wedding DJ. They hired me after one interview and I was put into training that weekend. I showed up at some storage facility and saw my other 7 or so fellow trainees. Since the ad was on Craigslist, I'm sure you can imagine the variety of people. The only thing I remember from training was my boss saying, if someone offers you a drink you turn it down. It looks bad for our company. However, if someone offers you a keg stand, you must do it. I do a few weddings and it is going about as well as you can imagine a 20-year-old hosting weddings. I'm on my third wedding or so and I notice the atmosphere is definitely thicker than my other events. The groom is peeved because his mother is drunk. He keeps coming up and telling me not to give her the microphone. Each time he leaves, his mother comes up to me and starts hitting on me trying to steal the microphone. After a few revolutions of the shitshow carousel, the mother of the groom comes up to me and shows me she snuck in a fifth of Jack Daniels. There was an open bar. I have no idea why she did this. Maybe she was planning on being cut off. She then slurs to me. Some people call me a cowgirl. I like to call myself a minx SSSSSSS. And goes back to work inventing twerking on the dance floor. The groom sees this, gets pee, takes his bride and just leaves. Like gone. As in not coming back. Apparently this puts me in charge of the reception now. I proceeded to alternate baby got back and girls just want to have fun while she booty pops as the guests slowly mingle out. TL. DR. Didn't take free drinks. Didn't frick the minx. I proceeded to alternate baby got back and girls just want to have fun. I think this should be code for bail people. Bail out. I'm being paid for this but you aren't. Abandon ship. Run. Ruin. I'm a baker. This isn't my story but my boss's story. Bride wanted a 5-layer cake. The act of putting one cake on top of another is $60. Plus deco fees if you want it to look seamless. Ribbon or something. So this cake is going to cost her a lot. Deco flowers are crazy expensive and not worth it. So we always advise brides to use fake plastic flowers or real ones. This bride wanted real ones. She said they would be at the hall, waiting on us. We do the cake, just how she wanted and go to the hall to set up. The wedding planner is there too. We set up everything and start looking for our flowers. The wedding planner has no clue what we're talking. She only had enough flowers for the table centerpieces. We start to panic. She wanted flowers and paid our fee for putting flowers on the cake. We start looking everywhere. Can't call the wedding party since, you know, they're busy. So, we steal a few flowers out of every centerpiece to fill the empty places on the cake. It isn't as full as it should be, but it looked okay. The next day she calls, crying her eyes out. We ruined her wedding day and she wants a full refund. We told her what happened on our end and she screams at us that we ruined her day. My boss asks where the flowers are for her cake and she tells us that she never ordered extra flowers. My boss just laughs and explains to her that we told her she needed to provide the flowers, and it was in the contract she signed with us. I'm not totally sure what happened after that, but my boss tells everyone in the restaurant bakery that no one from this point on is allowed to book wedding cakes without her there to talk to the bride, or whoever is ordering the cake. I do a little wedding photography, most of them with my aunt. I've done a few smaller ones on my own. Usually for people I know that are just looking for a record of their big day. I still edit them up and make them look nice but it's usually only a small ceremony and a reception. Anyways, a few years ago my aunt referred a bride to me because she was going to be out of town but was sure I could handle it. Now, I was 18 at the time and sort of a pushover. Plenty of brides had gotten a real steal for their photography because I was scared to charge too much. So this bride calls me and started asking me questions. I answered all of them and when I gave her my price, $750 for the whole thing. I'm talking hair and makeup, getting dressed for both parties, the ceremony, reception, and they're leaving. She quickly tried to haggle me down. I agreed and brought it down to $600. Which really leaves me with little to nothing for the amount of time I would be spending on the project, and she told me she would get back to me. A few days later she calls and tells me that a girl she went to high school with is going to do them for free and that she wouldn't be needing my services. Which was fine. I didn't really want to do it for that cheap and hey, my Saturday opened back up. So on the day of her wedding, In the middle of a day trip I decided to take since she explicitly told me she wouldn't need me. She calls and asked where I was. I kindly reminded her that she had told me that her friend was doing it for her and I wasn't needed, and that there was nothing that could be done anyway because I was at least 3 hours away from her venue and did not have any of my equipment ready when she insisted that she said nothing of the sort. I'm not sure what ended up happening. I like to assume her friend pulled through, but I'm sure she has nothing good to say about me to her friends, but I don't do much photography anymore, so it's whatever. That's one of the reasons I don't do it anymore. I just don't have the time or patience to deal with people like that anymore. I worked as a bridal fitting assistant in a wedding dress shop, and honestly, 99% of the customers we had were absolutely lovely. People were so happy, especially if they just got engaged and were looking at dresses for the first time, that we rarely had bridezillas. Probably the worst I ever saw was a woman who claimed her fiancé had died, so she wanted a refund. Then she came back in demanding the same dress back because they'd made up. Turns out he wasn't dead after all. I'm sure stories from people who work closer to the big day, or on the day itself, are much worse. Sisters, friends, and mothers though, that's another story. I've seen men a bride reduced to tears because they walked out in their dream dress and their best friend called them fat, or their sister pulled a face. I've witnessed arguments over the suitability of the groom. I've heard mothers be that there's no point getting married when the bride was already knocked up, etc etc. This is not too crazy, but we also used to rent out petticoats rather than selling them. I once took back a petticoat from a bride's mother that was 2 or 3 days past the due return date. While coughing all over me, she told me she'd been late to bring it back because she had swine flu. Wedding planners AskReddit, what is your best the bride must never know story? Groom here. I forgot the rings. Sent to groomsmen in a taxi. They were handed to the best man with less than a minute to go. At my best friend's wedding we were a little delayed getting introduced to the reception. She thinks it's because they were letting people get seated. Really, her father-in-law was running around setting up their cupcakes because the catering company had to fire an employee on the spot for being high. IDK what drug? She still has no idea 2 years later. Dude, if food service fired someone for drug use, I don't want to know what did it. Groom here, and my wife definitely knows, but our friend who was supposed to do the legal side, sign our marriage certificate, we had a separate pastor for the ceremony. RSVP'd for him and a girlfriend, but then stopped responding to messages as the wedding got close and didn't show. Yes, he is still alive. Luckily my groomsman happened to also be ordained and happily signed our marriage certificate. Also, the cake people decided the best way to hold together our 3-tier cake was through using bendy straws instead of dowel rods as supports in the cake. Bendy straws. This wasn't even a small podunk operation. It was a local chain company that many people have used and recommended. The cake slid off and they had already left the venue, so our wonderful catering company and venue staff did their best to put it back together and used extra roses to hide the damage. After the wedding my wife called the cake company to complain, and the manager was snarky, saying that using bendy straws was normal and part of their policy, and said the best he could do was offer like $50 and a free anniversary cake, which may have been fine, but due to his attitude was not. Finally he huffily snarked out, "Mom, what do you want me to do?" to my wife over the phone. So since his attitude didn't change, we put in a request to talk to the owner. The next day the owner calls and lo and behold is very gracious. States that in fact, no, it isn't their policy to use bendy straws, and offers a full refund, as well as reassures us that the issue will be dealt with that huffy franchise manager. I still can't get over that. Bendy straws. It's in the name that they bend. I use straws to hold cakes together all the time, but they're the thick bubble tea kind. They're really strong and easy to cut on sight, and I've never seen them fail. That being said, they don't bend. Bride here. At my wedding my maid of honor was responsible for holding my husband's wedding ring until we exchanged them in the ceremony, and the best man was holding mine. I was super distracted goofing around with my dad getting ready to walk up the aisle and didn't think to double check with Mo before we got the show on the road. During the ceremony I'm definitely paying all my attention on my husband and my grandfather, who was officiating the ceremony, and not on my Mo or bridesmaids. So I didn't even notice when my husband's aunt popped up behind me and slipped the ring to my Mo. Mo played it off really well, and I had no clue she'd forgotten the ring in the room we used to get dressed and ready. Nobody said a word, and would have gotten away with me never knowing had my aunt not been recording the ceremony for me. I noticed about a week later when my aunt posted the video to Facebook that his aunt popped up on the pulpit with everyone. I asked my sister, a bridesmaid, what happened, and she lost it laughing. My poor ma felt horrible she'd forgotten about the ring. But my husband's aunt saved the day when my sister and mom managed to wordlessly communicate what had happened, and she found the ring and got it to us in like 20 seconds. Wordlessly communicate. I'm imagining our ma doing this standing next to you on the pulpit. I was the bride when the wedding planner dropped the top 2 tiers of my cake and didn't say anything to me, then had the catering department fix it by putting flowers all over the first tier to hide what happened. My sister-in-law thought I knew because after they dropped it, one of them came upstairs where I was getting ready, and when they went back down she said, "It's okay, we have to try to fix it." No one ever came to me. The only reason I knew is that after the wedding she told me they did a nice job of fixing it even though she didn't think it could be fixed. I knew there was something different with the cake, but it looked nice, so I was okay with that. After hearing it, I was heated, but all in all, I couldn't even tell. Nice one, planner. Not a wedding planner, but the wedding planner for one of my good friend's wedding went above and beyond. Friend's mother was a horrid woman, very self-centered, narcissistic. The way you feel about Umbridge the first minute into the HP movie, you feel that way in 2 seconds meeting her. She was banned by friend and uninvited a week before the big day. The final straw being her mother was going to wear a wedding dress, not a white dress, which is bad enough. Actual wedding gown, to her daughter's wedding. It was a heck of a week, doing everything we could all do to help friend and her soon-to-be husband relax, enjoy and get that witch out of their heads. Day of wedding. It's beautiful, in a beautiful church. Everything is fantastic. The wedding planner, he was like some magical fairy godfather, just guiding and leading and managing one transition into another flawlessly. If there were hiccups, nobody knew or saw it. He even had set up professional childcare in the church's children room for those there with young ones. The vows ceremony flowed into the reception room. Then the horrid beast showed up, stomping up the hallway, wearing that dress looking like tore up Colfax H. She didn't even make it to the reception hallway. The wedding planner jumped her like a Secret Service agent. I don't even know where he came out of. One moment, crazy lady. Next, wedding planner silent ninja strike. Hand over her mouth and dragged her out so fast that us maids and the groomsmen didn't have time to even gasp. Bride and groom never found out she got in. They think she was arrested in the church's lot. She probably shouldn't have done what she did, having out of state warrants out for her. And they didn't find out even that much till after their month-long honeymoon. Which was probably due to even the rest of friend's family wanting nothing to do with her mother. All of us have continued to recommend him or use his business for own events back in CO since then. He looked bat crap crazy in the eyes, took it on like a badass, and then went about the rest of the day like a pro Disney cast member. I wish this was on video. Obligatory not a wedding planner story. When my wife and I got married, we chose a deep winter date. We had a friend make up all the buttonholes and bouquets and picked them up the day before the wedding, as we were getting married in another town. My wife's bouquet was quite large and was in a bucket of water to keep it fresh. We stayed in separate rooms, obviously, in a small hotel in the town, and I left the flowers in the car to ensure they stayed as fresh as possible. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that night was going to be the coldest of the year and plummet to about -12°C. The following morning, my wife had got up early with her party and already gone to the venue to get ready. I got up and got ready, then headed out to the car to drop the necessary flowers off with my father-in-law at the wedding venue before heading to the church. Got to the car, the bucket with her bouquet had frozen solid. I headed up to the venue and got her dad out. Like a champ, he took over and got the wedding planner to find every hairdryer in the place to melt the ice so the bouquet could be used. I left him to it, and when my wife turned up at the church, she looked amazing and was carrying an ice-free, wonderful bouquet. She had no idea there was any problems at all. At my stepsister's wedding, her grandfather had a mild stroke right in the middle of the vows. He's pretty loud and a touch belligerent anyways, but it became much more obvious something wasn't right as we were having the formal photos done. With barely a word, The wedding planner booked a taxi for my parents to take him to the hospital nearby to have him checked over quickly, promising to keep an eye on us kids. It came to light that it was a little more serious than they'd thought and that they wanted him to be admitted to the hospital near where we lived, a 4-hour drive away. Cue him phoning about 10 car rental places, the Saturday before Christmas no less, to have a car delivered to them at the hospital so they could leave immediately, whilst speaking to the hotel to have their bags packed up. He then delivered them to us and waited for us to finish dinner and toast the happy couple before driving us to the train station himself and booking us train tickets back home, even slipping us a tenner from his own pocket for the taxi to our house at the other end. The whole time he was keeping up to date with my parents so he could update my stepsister from worrying too much. I can only imagine how out her mind with worry she would have been without him telling her he was okay. Gramps ended up being just fine, and even jokes that it was the only way of getting out of giving a speech. The whole situation was dealt with such professionalism and care, and made what could have been a nightmare so much less stressful that he went on to plan several other family and friends' weddings on the back of that story alone. The girls in the family have made it tradition to wear my mom's wedding dress for their weddings. It's a beautiful mid-1960s dress, tons of pearls and lace and things, and a crazy long train. It had been in a cedar chest for about 15 years since its last use and needed to be restored. Due to last-minute errors, my niece was to pick it up the morning before the wedding. As a gift to her, I paid for the restoration and the restitching and sizing, whatever it's all called. She let me go with her to see it sized and fitted, and it's one of my favorite memories. I love that girl so much. I had concerns about how flippant and lackadaisical the dressmaker had been during the whole evolution. Way too many no problems and of course and don't worry to make me feel like she knew what she was really doing. She finished 2 days early. Sweet. I called her and paid, then asked her to hang on to it since I wanted it in safekeeping, not in my car or house. I got there the next day, the day before the wedding, and she didn't have it. She made a mistake and shipped it to St. Louis from Richmond, VA 2 days before. After a few minutes of finding out where it went and calling the recipient, another bride waiting for a dress, I checked Google Maps and got on the road. Then and there, less than 30 hours until the wedding, I called my sister, mother of the bride, and told her what was happening and forbade her from telling my niece. There was a backup wedding dress so it wasn't a total catastrophe, but tradition is tradition. 26 straight hours of driving later, the dress was getting unwrapped and my niece was putting it on for the big day. It was perfect and looked amazing on her. Then the group photo of all the other ladies who had worn it was taken. My niece never knew until months after the wedding when the dressmaker called her to apologize for the mix-up. Dang that daffy dressmaker for doing that. My niece is expecting a baby soon and I'm so stoked. I'll go the extra mile for her too if needed. P.S. I'm an uncle, soon to be granduncle. I'm so excited. Also the dress is group photo since people have asked. So far it's my mom, both sisters, my nephew's wife, and 2 of my nieces. Also at the reception they put out individual photos of the brides on the wedding day to show the evolution of the dress. I can't even look at those photos anymore. They make me cry so fast these days. That old black and white photo of my mom looking all pretty on her wedding day, then my sisters and so on. So many feelings. I can't even take it. I do worry the dress shouldn't be cut up anymore. It's not that different from the original, but I fear it's becoming Theseus' dress. The train is original though, and I had the dressmaker add a thick silk bottom so it should last a few more weddings. I hope one day my wife and daughters can wear it if they want to. I'll go the extra mile for her too if needed. More like 2670 equals 1820 miles. Holy crap, that's amazing. Not the wedding planner, but maid of honor. The bride's grandfather wasn't there for the ceremony. He got lost after insisting he knew the way and didn't need to follow anyone from the hotel and didn't make it in time. He was there for the reception however, and the bride didn't notice his absence in the audience during the vows. My wife's grandfather fell out of his chair after dinner during our wedding reception, and some drunk idiot yelled that he was having a heart attack. Freaked my wife right out. Grandpa was just drunk. I wish there were things my wedding planner had kept from me. Instead she heavily sampled the mixed drinks for the reception pre-wedding and called my mother out for payment while we were taking family photos. But my mom's wedding planner hid the fact that I dropped the top tier of her wedding cake when she and my dad got hitched. I was 7 and they thought me carrying it was a good idea. I wasn't a planner, but was a DJ. My partner and I had set up the equipment and done our tests. When the wedding party and guests arrived, we did our final mic checks to make sure everything would be ready for the first dance. When we checked the wireless mic, I noticed there was a lot of static in it, so I asked my partner to walk around the venue while talking into the mic to see if I could get any idea what was going on. I put the microphone into queue and put on a pair of headphones to listen as he walked around. He started by saying, "Test, test, test." Then he would walk by a guy and go, "Testicle, testicle, testicle." Then by a woman and go, "Breast, breast, breast." Pretty soon, he's walking around the banquet hall saying, "Testicle, testicle, breast, testicle, breast, breast." He does this around the entire perimeter of the facility until he gets back to me. When he got back, I told him that there was too much static and we would just need to switch to the wired mic. Once we got things switched over, I decided to work on the wireless a little more, so I turned off the transmitter and just listened to the static from the receiver. After 30 seconds or so, I started to pick out voices and thought to myself, "Oh crap." I started looking around and, sure enough, there's the videographer talking to his partner and their mouths match up with the voices I'm hearing. Turns out his wireless mic was on the same frequency as ours, so my partner possibly caused breast, breast, testicle, testicle to be recorded on this couple's tape of their cherished memories. There are a ton of great stories here, but this is the first one that made me laugh out loud. I keep rereading it and it's hilarious every time. Picturing the couple's faces when they watch their video. Friends of friends got a call the night before the wedding from an invited guest. Could he bring his new girlfriend? Okay, sure. Adjusted plans, rearranged tables and ordered another place at a table. Wedding day, those two didn't show up. Wedding videographer. One time my drive just crapped out. It was early in my business and I had zero software recovery setups. The bride's final wedding video and only copy of the raw footage was on there, ready to be sent in final delivery via USB. I was in shambles. The only project file was there. The only copy of the raw footage. The only copy of the final video was there. But I did have an unwatermarked version that I'd uploaded to them as a sneak peek. Thank you 4K YouTube downloaded. I'm sure my mother wished this could have applied to them. When my parents got married, my dad had to call her while she was having her hair done to break the news to her that the demolitions in the building beside the reception venue had gone horribly wrong. They sent some debris towards the venue and right through a wall. My mother burst into tears on the spot. Wedding was saved by my grandparents' next door neighbors, who went frick it, party at our place and ordered a shitton of pizza for everyone. I didn't have a wedding planner, but my whole family kept me from finding out about a huge issue. A quick bit of background. My wedding was a little rough from the start. We were on a shoestring budget. $14K start to finish, including all incidentals, in an area where $30K is considered a cheap wedding, and things were not always going well. The photographer didn't commit until a week before the wedding, and on the day of, the bus carrying my husband, stepdaughter, groomsmen and bridesmaids crashed into the venue. No one was hurt and my mom is a paramedic. More than 1/2 of my guests are nurses, first responders and paramedics. We were covered. Just before I'm set to walk down the aisle, my dad says to me, "Just so you know, your grandma was feeling a little sick so she had to stay home today. She was 94. It made total sense to me. One of my cousins was missing from the wedding, but they said she took my grandma to the doctor. The grandma can't drive. Makes sense. It wasn't until 2 days later when I was in NYC with our out-of-state, out-of-country guests that I see a post from my cousin with a picture of the view from grandma's hospital room. She'd had a major heart attack the night before my wedding, had surgery the day of or after, can't remember which, and all I was told was she was feeling a little sick because no one wanted me sad on my wedding day. Aunts, uncles, cousins were all there to celebrate with me. They all knew, you're talking almost 40 plus people, and they all kept it a secret. That's really sweet and must have taken incredible willpower on their part. I hope she was okay." Former wedding planner here. I managed a 5-star hotel's event department and we had high-end clients that would spend up to and far over a minimum of $150,000 for a single day at our property. Even under the most detailed-oriented people, things fall through the cracks. The reality is that most brides, on the day, are somewhat distracted. A lot of issues that would be gargantuan the day before come across as trivial. Unless it is vital to something the bride will see or hear. Don't say a freaking word. She doesn't need to know that the name cards Saint Table 15 are wrong. Up to and far over a minimum of X. This is like a maths teacher had a stroke. People invited themselves last minute to the wedding and had to find them seats. They texted my husband, the groom, at 7 AM the day of. Not a wedding planner, but one of the groomsmen absolutely had to work that day and didn't make it to the wedding till like 15 minutes beforehand. Oh yeah, he was the one to walk her down the aisle too, so it was an important thing. Well, my husband told me 3 days before our wedding the venue forgot us. Should not have happened. My entire ability to breath disappeared for a few minutes. Working at a hotel, the concierge gave away the wrong wedding cake to a couple from the day before. I was sent 60 miles with the day of the wedding to collect a vegan cake in my old VW Polo. Highlights from the day: lying to the bride and groom that their cake was in a fridge and a chef had gone home with the keys. Driving with yesterday's wedding cake buckled up on my passenger's seat. Overtaking a police van on the motorway, only slightly speeding, but not getting pulled over. Airborne over the speed bumps in the hotel's mile-long driveway. The big reveal in front of the guests. After driving back with the right cake 2 hours late, we unpacked it without checking first. Blamed the smudged icing on the original delivery as it came from London by car to Scottish countryside. They loved their smudged vegan cake and had a beautiful wedding. I was gifted a few bottles of wine that I still have. Dozens of weddings, but that was the scariest day in the business. Mission Impossible, a cake job. Not a wedding planner, but my now ex-husband showed up an hour and a half late to our wedding. Turns out the best man had gotten so drunk he passed out in a bar and they couldn't find him. I didn't find out until we got the wedding photos back weeks later. Bride and groom choose to do a sand combining thing in their ceremony. 2 different colors of sand are poured from separate containers into one container by bride and groom, representing unity, etc. They were going to leave for their honeymoon immediately after the ceremony and arranged for us to hold onto all their gifts and such, including the sand vase, until they returned. Well, it got knocked over in our house and shattered and sand went everywhere. We quickly bought all the same stuff from where they'd gotten it. My mother-in-law was their wedding coordinator, so she knew exactly what to get and where to get it. Looked at photos taken from the ceremony and duplicated the unity sand as best we could. We never told them that their unity sand was actually destroyed and redone by us. Anyway, 3 years later they weren't doing well, and the wife killed the groom and then herself. I guess it was the sand. Just kidding. They're doing great and have 4 kids. Jesus, don't do that to me. I was a wedding planner professionally for 2 years and stopped, but recently my sister asked that I plan coordinate her wedding since I had the experience. I hit it off really well with her now husband's brother. We slept together at the after party, and we're both freaking out that my sister and his brother are gonna find out. If so, the holidays should be interesting. Side note, is that wit? Is he my brother-in-law, or just my brother-in-law's brother? Brother-in-law's brother. Look back 50-60 years and you'll notice that it was quite common for 2 brother to marry 2 sister. So these type of relationships are not that uncommon, especially in small towns. One of the bride's guests flipped out in one of those "so when are we getting married" arguments with her boyfriend at the venue. She left the wedding, went to his parents' home where their daughter was staying, took her daughter out of her grandmother's lap while expounding upon her child's grandparents' flaws the entire time before driving away, presumably in the direction of home on the other side of the state. Eventually we were able to convince her to stay at a hotel and bring the daughter back to her grandparents the next day. The bride was quite close with the boyfriend of this madwoman and would absolutely have been distraught by these events. I wish I could say the couple separated after this, but as I work their wedding too, I just chuck it up to the, evidently, masochistic husband. Ladies, don't pick that battle. If you genuinely have to ask on such selfish and unfair terms, someone else's wedding, and can't wait to fight till you get home, then you have other problems that are more important than the wedding you are seeking. I hate the current trend in TV where there'll be one marriage, and another character takes the opportunity to propose, and they then get married right then and there because hey everyone's together and the officiator is right there. Like wow, frick you guys. I wanna see them get a bill for half the cost of the wedding. Not wedding planner, but friend gets married, maid of honor, not me, forgets to order the bouquet, which is made of silk flowers and it is a unique piece which takes about 2 or 3 weeks to be handcrafted. So, the day of the wedding the maid is searching desperately for the aforementioned piece. Almost mission impossible. She finds it. It was from a cancelled wedding that would happen that very day. I'd love to know the statistical chances of that. Getting married a week from Saturday. I shouldn't be reading this crap at 3 AM. Something is going to go wrong but no one is going to know but you or whoever doesn't tell you. But the best thing is that you're going to be married and it's going to be wonderful. The bride pulled me aside during rehearsal to tell me the groom's brother, also the best man, was planning to find a girl on Tinder as his date. She was less than thrilled about all of this as apparently he doesn't have a great track record. He found someone and my bride was stressing. We made it through ceremony and cocktail hour without incident. Dinner was going great and we're about to do toasts when I can't find the brother anywhere. Lo and behold, the girl is gone too. I have the DJ stall a bit and recruit some people to go find them. I walk into the bathroom and under a stall I see guys' shoes with a girl squatting down between them. Little shoots. So I pretend to be on the phone and say we're about to do toasts. I just have to find the best man then I'll be right there. I heard an oh crap as I walked out and he was in giving his toast 5 minutes later. As everyone is out dancing and having a grand old time one of the resort staff pulls me aside and says there's a situation. I go talk with them and they've also snagged my groom. Come to find out brother and Tinder girl have been removed from the property because they were found in a less than discreet spot, with his head up a dress going down on her. Groom looks at me and all he says is, she can't know. So my sweet bride not only didn't find out that Bill was getting head in a bathroom stall 5 minutes before the speech, but she also doesn't know he was kicked out for going down on the class act Tinder girl he found. Thank God for great staff and vendors who are flexible. Not a wedding planner, didn't have a wedding planner, but was a bride who didn't find out about a mishap until way later. My wedding was phenomenal, beautiful, elegant, and relatively inexpensive. My maid of honor was one of my best friends who flew over to the US from the UK for our second meeting ever. We'd been online friends for about 10 years prior. At one point about halfway through the reception, I noticed my younger sister was missing, and then, moments later, I noticed one of my friends, a girl she'd had her eye on, was also missing. At that point I'd already mentioned to my mom that my sister was missing, and I casually said, oh, friend, is missing too. After realizing the implications, I added, like, maybe they're in the bathroom, but my mom began hunting them down. My husband and I sat back at our sweetheart table and laughed it off and that was that. Apparently, my maid of honor found my sister and my friend. Getting better acquainted in the bridal suite. This was her second or third time meeting either of them, but she yelled at them both to get back down to the wedding, as it was my day and they could screw around on their own time. They came back down looking like they'd just been spoken to by the principal and I knew something had happened, but it wasn't until 2 years after the wedding that I found out what. She was a spectacular maid of honor, and took her job very seriously. People who have been to a wedding where someone objected to the marriage, what was their reason? The wife objected because she had shorty found out her soon-to-be husband had been sleeping with her sister for the past 8 years despite the two of them having 2 kids. Dang, that's even worse. What kind of sister does that? Probably does not count but still worth mentioning. Wedding. Jewish. Final moments and once the marriage was final the bride straight up runs to the crowd and says I'm divorcing my husband for sleeping with my sister. Bride found out about the cheating but was smart and got back at her sister worse than ever. Forgive my lack of Jewish knowledge but we found out that, something in the Jewish faith, once you're married the bride or groom cannot marry or remarry someone related to the previous wife or something like that. So this bride not only publicly humiliated him but sister by outing them but sealed the fact that they can never ever be together. Wow, that's the proudest and bravest revenge. At my half sister's wedding, when they got to the objection part, of her mother, same dad different mum, leant across to another family member and whispered, yeah, he isn't good enough for her. The offer can stop the wedding, and asked her to speak up, saying it's a legal part to the wedding and if she has an objection then please state it loud enough to hear. Sister's mum laughed it off and sat down red-faced, while I glared evils into the back of this woman's head. My sister is awesome and the guy she's with makes her super happy. Bonus awkward points. In his speech he thanked sister's mother for accepting him onto the family and how happy he was to have another mum. Both his parents have died. Oof from me. Yikes. Hope your sister's happy. Not quite objected, but I went to a wedding where the bride got smashed before the ceremony and couldn't say her vows, had to go have a nap and miss the reception. It's very weird to me how drunk people will get at their own wedding. I would want to remember every moment of my expensive butt party. I was at one of my good friend's wedding. She was marrying a man she thought was a truck driver. And when the priest says, does anyone object, this woman stands up and says, I do. Turns out the guy wasn't a truck driver but was a married man from Florida who had 2 kids and the woman was his wife. Holy crap, an actual legal reason. I wasn't there, but an old friend told me about a wedding he attended years ago. When it came time for the objection part, a voice in the back yells, she sucked my dong like 30 minutes ago. Bride bursts into tears. Groom just walks away. That blows. Went to a wedding. Everything seems to be going well. Groom felt up the 18-year-old niece. Mob finds out while bride and groom are at altar and things went to crap pretty soon after. My good friend's wedding video is awesome. A big thunderstorm blew up during the ceremony, and just as the minister asked, does anybody have any objections, lightning strikes the church with a tremendous kaboom and all the lights go out. There's some nervous laughter, and the minister says that doesn't count, and the ceremony continued. God is jealous. The groom's father objected and said that he couldn't just stand by and watch because he had proof that she was just using him so she could pay off her debts. From what I heard, a person in her group chat got into a big fight with her on the day of the wedding and ended up sending the groom's father a bunch of screenshots of the bride admitting that she was planning on divorcing him after he paid off all her student debts and bought a house so that she could get it in a divorce. The bride tried to deny it, but I guess the groom had suspicions that she was just using him, and after he saw the proof he called the wedding off. My friend, who invited me as her +1, was super embarrassed, but I was thoroughly entertained. I would imagine this is the equivalent of watching a reality show. All the drama, none of the involvement. Just need some popcorn. The bride was banging this dude at the time of her marriage, not the groom BTW, and then someone ended up objecting. The guy she was fricking, and said she has been fricking me, that cow, and she is better off with me. The groom dumped her after that, and then everyone in my province knows her, so no one wants her, so she moved province. Her breakdown at the wedding was priceless. I was at a friend's wedding when his mother got up during the vows and said objection. Everyone stared at her in confusion while she stood there staring at his soon-to-be wife. His mother then proceeded to say, I don't want my baby being with that rat bastardy for the rest of his life. Everyone just kind of sat there looking confused and shocked. Her son, my friend, looked at her with a beet red face and ran out of the church we were in. I guess he felt the same way but didn't want to agree. Long story short, the bride ended up calling the wedding off and they broke up. Didn't get a slice of cake. Good times. Was the bride a bad person though? Fun fact. In France, the religious ceremony has no value, and the legal wedding is performed in a short ceremony by the mayor, typically the same day, in the morning, then everyone rushes to the religious one. This ceremony is public, and as such the doors must be opened so that anyone with a valid legal motive can interrupt. Sneakily closing the doors can get the marriage annulled. This is similar to the rule in the UK and possibly elsewhere, too, where any marriage in a church has to be open to the public, because any official service has to be public. Not an objection, but had a drunk guy friend tell me, the bride, to give him a call when things didn't work out. Obviously cut him out of my circle. He called me a few years later, a week before his own wedding, and asked if I was still happy. My husband and I just celebrated 15 years together and look forward to many more. Whoa, hitting on the bride, that there's a player. A guy had been molesting some of the girls from the school where he was the after-school activity program director. The bride has a daughter herself and knew about some of the allegations but decided to marry him anyway, out of state. Well, some of us were still invited, and unbeknownst to her, a woman barges in cussing up a storm because her daughter is one of the ones that he molested really bad and she's in counseling because of it and he got off free. Was a full out brawl. Intruder lady and a few others were arrested, and that was the end of that wedding. She ran off somewhere and I guess cried for the remainder of the evening, and her family asked everyone to leave. She still married him but eloped somewhere private and posted pictures on Facebook. Didn't know the couple as I was the musician for the ceremony, but had someone object because he was a Spurs fan and the groom was a Liverpool fan, still feeling from the 1st of June. Lumfeo. We didn't object, but it was hard to keep our mouths shut at my aunt's wedding. She'd had a hard life. Her 2 daughters were mentally disabled to the point where they had to live in a care facility full time. They'll never progress beyond toddlerhood but are in their 30s. Her first husband abused the girls and then killed himself. The only bright side was that he left her millions in real estate. Her second serious partner left her, and she was lonely as heck. She lectured and was a smart lady, with a PhD, but somehow fell for this con man. He's a bad dude. He was after her money, which was supposed to be for the future care of the girls. He wasn't allowed back in several countries because he had conned people out of so much money, and there was something very wrong with him mentally. He claimed to be able to cure cancer and took cancer patients' money and would stay in hotels then leave without paying. He'd steal credit cards from people, etc. Anyhow, we were invited to the wedding. We'd found out about his issues, but he had convinced my aunt that it was all lies and the world was against him. We struggled so hard to be there for her that day, but we needed her to know that we were on her side, as he had already started to poison her mind with allegations that her family weren't good for her. Soon he had her totally under his control and none of us were allowed to speak to her. We were pretty worried, but couldn't do anything. Eventually, after about 5 years, he blew through most of her money. They did IVF and had a son, who is now 8. Her husband left when the money was gone, and she got a bit wise to his lies. So now she's nearly 60, raising a child, and trying to rebuild bridges with her family and friends. Kinda wish we had objected at the wedding, but she was set on her path. And other people like her parents had told her all the bad stuff they had found out about her husband, and it hadn't stopped her. Figured all we could do was be there for her. You shouldn't blame yourself for not objecting at the wedding. That probably would have only driven you further apart. I hope she's doing better now. At my cousin bride's wedding, one of the groomsmen spent the entire ceremony facing the audience, with his back to the bride. He felt that my cousin was an overly judgmental succubus who would nag and belittle him. He was absolutely right. Not the wedding but the rehearsal. Bill's crazy ex somehow finds the location but mistook the date. Started her insaneness by stating she forgave him for breaking up with her and he seriously needed to stop trying to act like he moved on. Him and my sister had been together for a couple of years and had been living together for at least 2. Like B, I'm pretty sure he ain't faking it. Then decided to claim she was pregnant with his child. Bill proceeded to tell her that she was his greatest mistake and that if she was pregnant it was probably her stepfather's, just like the last one she claimed was his, and aborted without telling him. Me and the best man kindly kept her away from the couple while the friend who owned the house the wedding was taking place had called the police because she was refusing to leave her property. My husband and I got married when my oldest was 3 mo. When the officiant asked if there were any objections, our daughter whined loudly and started crying right after. Timing couldn't have been any more perfect. Officiant replied too late. Everyone was cracking up. Honestly, the best part of our wedding video. LOL. Slightly unrelated, but I think I read somewhere on Reddit that the objection part of the ceremony was never meant to be about she should be with me instead, or you'll never be as happy with her as you were with me. Its inclusion is so if anyone knows of a legal reason that the marriage cannot be valid. One of them is already married, the bride isn't a virgin, bride and groom are siblings, etc. They have the opportunity to say so before the marriage is allowed and thus prevent any martial sins from taking place. at an anime con a few years back in Ohio. The smaller of the two had the Hyatt as a clue. At the same time there was a wedding in one of the unrented ballrooms. The bride had a freak out and ended up having sex with a Batman cosplayer. Dark Knight version to be specific. I mean, it's more understandable than shagging bat nipples. It's not exactly what you asked, but I was once at an engagement party where the groom-to-be tried to make out with his fiance's best friend. Screaming and crying and threats of violence ensued. Technically they were only engaged for the first half of their engagement party. One of my oldest friends is getting married this evening and I am one of her bridesmaids. It's going to take everything I have not to object. I and all of our friends, and seemingly even her parents, can't stand her husband-to-be. He's a massive tool and nobody can understand what she sees in him. He's not abusive or anything, just relentlessly triggered and annoying. He's like the sheltered homeschool kid who enters the real world at age 21 and tries to adapt by acting all street. He vapes indoors and makes rape jokes and quotes things even 4chan would find 385 me. The real wife busted the doors open and screams at the top of her lungs, "I am the real legal wife, stop the wedding." Still the reception was continued. I was at the one wedding where the bride had only known the groom for what seemed like a day. They didn't seem like a good match. She was a good few feet taller than him, and it looked like it wouldn't work. Anyway, they're at the altar. The priest says his line and this dude and his mate comes running and shouting. He objects and confesses his love to the bride. The groom's buddies get a bit physical and a fight breaks out. Long story short, groom gets eaten by a dragon and the bride turns into an ogre and they live in a swamp now with their 3 kids, so I guess it all worked out for them. You got me good. Glad you asked. I try to tell this story to everyone I can. My cousin had a rather extravagant wedding at an upscale golf course. I didn't really want to go because I knew he had hooked up with a friend in our group after he was engaged to the bride. But family pressure and an open bar persuaded me and I'm dang glad I went. I knew it was going to be good when our friend he cheated with was there. He's not the smartest man. Anyway, we have a few drinks at the bar and head to our seats for the ceremony. Apparently they hit her pretty hard because at the moment of truth she yells, "I object, your honor. That man's dong is too small to satisfy. He is unfit for marriage," like it was a goddamn court case. Everyone went silent for a second, and then I looked over at my buddy and we burst out laughing our asses off. Bride was slapped groom. They both cried, but after a brief break and conversation they decided to go through with it, and surprisingly they're getting divorced after a solid 2-year marriage. I like how you called it a solid 2-year marriage. I've posted this before. I objected to my friend getting married during the ceremony. We were at the Whitechapel in Vegas with friends and I had been drinking, so she just laughed it off. Well, she told me later she should have listened because he ended up back in prison. She's now with a good guy, but was having to do the whole back and forth to jail and then putting money on his books. I technically didn't go but was involved. My cousin was marrying a man she knew a total of 4 months and everyone on both sides objected. They went ahead with it anyway and just went to the courthouse. Total length of the relationship, 1 year. Had a wedding interrupted because the bride was already married in 3 different states, with 3 different names, and 5 kids. Not exactly an objection, but I worked as a photographer at a wedding chapel on the Vegas Strip. We had a young Chinese couple come in with their friends and get married. The minister did his normal speech, but when it came down to the vows I could tell something was wrong. The groom kept putting the ring on the bride's finger and taking it off hesitantly. This went on for a few uncomfortable minutes. At one point the groom asked the bride if there was someone else and she nodded her head. After a couple more awkward moments the minister explained that if he did not pronounce them man and wife it wouldn't be legal. They decided not to get married. Their friends still bought the DVD though. That was one of my favorite moments working there. I remember it like it was yesterday. Everyone had gathered in a tight bunch. There were birds nesting in the nearby trees, watching with beady eyes. There were cries of kiss, kiss, kiss. It truly was a joyful occasion. Then there was this guy who called himself the school principal, burst through the crowd in a suit and demanded for the whole thing to be called off, spouting things such as peer pressure and who was in charge of this. On hearing this, well, the crowd ran like heck, closely followed by the bride and groom. Primary school weddings. Bruh. My aunt's wedding. Groom's mother shouted that she objects and I immediately stood up and objected her objection in dramatic fashion. She objected because now the flow of money isn't to her anymore. I was at this wedding and everything was going good so far, but we noticed this creepy guy sort of hanging out outside the church. We ignored him and thought he'd gone and the ceremony started. The bride and groom were saying their vows, but then this same creep just bursts in and starts saying they can't get married because the bride is a W and starts shouting about how the goddamn door should be closed. He was dressed really weirdly as well. Who the frick wears a black top hat and red jacket to go crash a wedding? Had me going in the first half, not gonna lie. I've been to plenty of weddings and never heard the "if anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace." I think it's something that exists mostly in movies. I've attended 3 weddings and I've heard it all 3. Where I'm from, the objection was generally included because if you didn't have a genealogist in your family, you could have accidentally gotten married to a cousin. Nowadays nearly every family from the area has a family tree posted online so you can check before you start dating. The objector, I don't know the proper term, was in fact 7 months pregnant with the groom's child. Happened to be the bride's cousin. I went to a wedding where the entire crowd laughed wildly when the question was asked, but they didn't actually object. The bride and groom had both led colorful lives. Bride's sister and cousin both objected because the bride was freaking around, and continued to do so a few weeks before the wedding. It was done the day before the wedding though and not during. They forced the bride to confess and she did. Naturally there was no wedding the next day. From the outside, they did look like a good couple though. A random kid burst into the chapel and screamed objection before getting distracted by bubbles that someone gave one of the little kids. Spoiler, the kid was me. As people try to escort him out, he passed out cold. He was drunk. Very drunk. I hope this post blows up cause I'm really interested. I wanted to ask the same and I was always interested in what was it like. Even though I don't have a story, I'll contribute a like for this. Went to relative's wedding. Reason? The lady objectee was the bride's girlfriend who she broke up with because of the wedding, but got pregnant by the groom because of a one drunken nightstand from the recent engagement party. Everything's in shambles because of the very shocking revelation. The costly wedding then got cancelled. I was expecting more of these to be like into Model Chi Life where one of them asks one out and then another two ask them as well so they have to choose. Flies in through a stage wire above you wait. A guy objected my aunt's wedding saying that she was overweight and he was as thin as a stick. Both not true. My aunt is really strong and is 5'11" while her boyfriend works out a lot more and is 6'0". Not an objection, but at my dad's cousin's wedding the best man screamed and fell to the floor unconscious right as they were about to exchange rings and was rushed to the hospital. Turns out he had a heart attack. He's fine now and recovered quickly. I wanted to object. People are like he's so great and I'm thinking he took money I was handing to a homeless person away from them. Well, I was like 3 so my sisters retold it to me. So during the objection part someone my family didn't know said that had an affair 3 months into the couple's relationship. The wedding happened 1 month after according to my sisters. What should you absolutely not do at a wedding? My uncle Rob got married at the same place to 2 different women about 15 years apart. My father says, "Hey Rob, after the 3rd time do you get your own parking space or something?" The bride's family were least impressed. Awesome joke, horrible timing. Getting stupidly drunk and lifting up the bride's skirt while the groom is going for the garter thing on her leg. Puking all over the DJ soundboard and in his bag. Almost starting a fist fight with childhood friends. My friend Jorge did all this at my buddy's wedding. It's all on tape. Do not bring up the subject of the groom's ex-wife, especially in a speech. I witnessed a terrible best man speech where he basically bashed the groom's prior marriage and said that he hoped this one turned out better. It was a truly painful speech. Have a ridiculously expensive wedding at a resort and expect all guests to front the cost. My wife and I were invited to a couple's wedding in Jamaica. The cost per person was $1,000 for 4 days, not including food or airfare, during a busy tourist season. It was also a themed wedding, and not a fun theme like Renaissance garb, but some kind of Italian clothing where everyone had to match. You had to show up to some place, get fitted for the style, and buy the suit or dress. For a guy it was about $350, but depending on the women's size, up to $1,200 for a dress. I have no idea how much a bridesmaid or usher had to pay. This was just to be a guest. We declined, along with a majority of those invited. The bride gave everyone a hard time, especially because the $1,000 person was only if some minimum purchased was reached. The fact we wouldn't pay meant others would be forced to pay more. I just didn't have the estimated $5,000 plus time off work to go. They had the wedding anyway, but out of several hundred they planned for, 30 came. The groom had to change his best man twice because his first 2 couldn't pay the steep fees required. This was flaunted as well. Now we know who our real friends are. Marriage lasted 7 months. I forgot why they split up. True story. Groom had a previous fiancée who died suddenly and accidentally before they could get married. Very sad. Tragic. She was a sweet girl and everyone loved her. One of those whole town turned out for the funeral sort of things. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and Groom has met a new girl. She's a good person, but she's not from the small town that the former fiancé was from, and everyone sort of already has it out for her. The new girl is big city, has a little edge to her. Old girl, small town girl next door. No matter what, the new girl will never ever be as good as the old girl. So, at the wedding, the sister of the groom, who is a bridesmaid, offers a toast in remembrance of the dead fiancé. It was among the least classy, shocking things I had ever seen, and the sister was absolutely clueless about what she'd done. Long story short, don't ever talk about the bride or groom's exes, be they saints, sinners, living or dead. The wedding day is about the couple, and not their past relationships. My mother-in-law stood up at my wedding reception and said this marriage between Henry and what's-her-name is never going to last. I am what's-her-name. Don't do that. I'm still angry 13 years later. That sounds like a great way to ensure that your son's marriage is going to last. I mean, he still can't divorce you without feeling like a tool when his mom says I told you so. Give a rude toast insulting the bride or groom. When they are exchanging the rings, don't stand up, dressed as Sauron and say but they were, all of them, deceived, for another ring was made, whilst putting on a ring too. In my whole life I have never wanted to do something as bad as I now want to do this. Grill the bride and groom about when they are having children. I'm paying for your drinks, is it that hard to just say congratulations? Also wanna add, show up if you didn't RSVP said you weren't coming, and more importantly, do not bring a date if your invite didn't say and guest. If you really think your new boyfriend of 6 whole weeks should be invited to your second cousin's big day, ask the couple before assuming and just showing up with another person. Organize a wager amongst the guests. They can bet how many weeks the marriage will last. Side bets with who's going to cheat first are included. Make sure everyone has a chance to bet, including the bride and groom. Seems a bit unfair that the bride and groom are allowed to bet. I once photographed a wedding, and during the family photographs with the bride and groom, the bride's mother and father were put on opposite sides because they were divorced and not behaving. The mother was drunk, and during the photo she was yelling over the heads of the bride and groom, insulting her ex-husband. The bride was near tears and we had to stop taking pictures until they could get the mother to calm down. It was the last wedding I ever photographed. If you are a bride or groom, don't make a scene. It will be what nearly everyone remembers about your wedding if you do. My wife and I had a small ceremony with just our parents and my sister and her husband. We were in a small dining room for the reception and the AC had broken earlier in the day. They had repaired it in time for dinner, but it was taking a while to cool down. The parents started getting ornery, but some strong drinks later we were all laughing, dancing, and sweating up a storm. Talking with the family later, they were all surprised that my wife or I didn't pitch a huge fit about the temperature. They were pleased too, as it would have been the only hitch in an otherwise awesome day. On the other hand, my sister and her husband were married and had a cousin announce her pregnancy over the microphone after dinner. My sister tried to ask her quietly to just leave, but she made a scene before doing so. Then the groom's best man got into a fight with his fiancée and she tried to drive off crying but backed into a tree. She was sober. The fiancé was belligerently drunk and threatening to fight people to get him outside to cool off. So the groom tossed a bucket of ice water on him. Despite that, rest of the wedding, reception, and day being fine, that is all people remember. Drink a quart of whiskey before the ceremony, refuse to put on a shirt during the ceremony and then sit in your car and blast techno the whole time because you were asked to leave. Someone did this at a wedding I was at on Saturday. Never stop the ceremony to propose to your girlfriend. Sure, you'll have free pictures and video of it, but everyone will be peer to forever. Generally announcing anything is a pretty dumb idea. A cousin announced her pregnancy at my sister's wedding over the microphone during the reception. After she got off the microphone, my sister asked her to leave. I attended a wedding for a friend a couple summers ago. His best man, who was extremely intoxicated, got up to give his best man speech. We were all nervous about it already, but when he blurted out, "You know, me and your wife, we have a past." No, dear God, abort. Me and some friends were camping on the lake for the weekend of a wedding and one of them didn't pack nice pants or a belt. He wore a dress shirt that he apparently dropped in the road while unloading our stuff because we found it hanging on the outhouse the next morning. He then proceeded to get drunk the night before the wedding, run straight for the lake and trip over a stump, smashing his face into a fence post. So for the wedding he showed up with a shoestring belt, dirty shirt, a massive black eye, and on top of that he accidentally brought 2 dates to the wedding. Don't do any of these things. That being said, I'm glad he did. Become a drunk enough adult to the point where you start making weird comments to underage girls. I had a bad experience as an underage girl. If you are a bride, don't hold any babies. They are going to crap, pee, vomit, bleed, cry all over you. Babies aren't supposed to bleed. I think you're holding babies wrong. Anything that makes you the center of attention. This is about the couple's day and nobody else's. You want to propose to your girlfriend? Save it for the jumbotron. Want to give a clever butthole speech and then strip off your tear-away clothes and go streaking? Save it for graduation. Dying of a heart attack? Just sit in a corner and at least try to pretend you are British and slip off your mortal coil quietly and with dignity. For the heart attack, I mean, it's the least you can do. You're already going to ruin the mood. The least you can do is do so quietly. At my brother's wedding, the bride's sister, the maid of honor, threw a huge freaking tantrum and put the bride's veil in the bathroom trash can right before the ceremony was supposed to start. So, there's that. True story here, folks. I'm sad I'm commenting so late because this will probably get buried. Don't bring random not significant partners to your friend's wedding. When I got married, one of our groomsmen asked to bring the girl he had recently started dating, a real beast of a woman. We said okay. She got so drunk at the reception and managed to sneak into almost every picture our photographer got. She was loud. She was smoking the whole time. Just generally very annoying. The real kicker is, a few years later, long after they had broken up, our friend bumped into her brother. He asked how she was doing. Brother's response? Not good, man. She's in jail for life. She murdered our mother. And that is how I came to have a murderer in my wedding photos. Don't be late. And if you are, don't get mad if they carried on without you. My BFF's mother told me her wedding had a strict start time. She kept to it, as she and her husband were leaving, a few aunts were just walking in. LOL. Don't be late. And if you are, don't get mad if they carried on without you. Yup, you only wait for 3 people. The bride, the groom and whoever's marrying them. The rest miss what they miss. Instead of untying the little bag of birdseed and showering the bride and groom, toss the whole thing and have it land in the bride's cleavage. I was a kid and didn't know the tradition. No apology needed for that kind of accuracy. When the minister says if anyone knows of any reason these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace. Don't roll 2d20s on a wooden pew. It echoes terribly loud when no one is talking. Say frick or goddang in a best man speech when my wife's Christian family, including a pastor, is in attendance. My best man started his speech with goddang man. It's your fricking day, man. It's your fricking day. Who knew he could say so many wrong things in one sentence? I learned the hard way. Don't frick with the cake. I was 6 years old for Christ's sake, and that didn't stop the bride from despising me ever since. I still hear about fricking with the cake to this day. You shouldn't have touched the wedding cake then, you little bastard. Propose to your girlfriend while you're in someone else's wedding reception. You, sir, are a douchebag if you do this. I was at a wedding where someone did this outside the church. They didn't even wait until the reception. Don't stand at the door with a brown paper bag. Hold said bag next to each guest's hand and bar everyone darker than the bag from entering. I'm a professional wedding DJ and I've seen things go on behind the scenes. From the guest's perspective and the bride and groom's perspective. Bride and grooms, the day of your wedding is not your planning day. Stop giving instructions and let your coordinators and vendors take care of it. You being a Bridozilla or Godzilla stresses you out and makes everyone's day horrible. Don't leave your guests for 2 or more hours while you take pictures in the sunset. Don't think you can treat your vendors and guests like slaves just because it's your special day. Don't complain that everyone is not having fun when you're both just sitting there and not encouraging your guests to have fun. Don't invite guests just because you want gifts. This usually ends up in having no gifts at all. Had a bride invite 300 guests in hopes of getting gifts. She barely knew them and received 20 gifts. Don't spend too much time with one guest and seclude all your other guests. Guests, if you're the brother, uncle, whatever, don't assume you have authority. As vendors, coordinators, DJs have already discussed things with the bride and groom. No, we can't play 20 more songs because that requires to pay 40 people worth of staff because of your drunk butt. It's up to the bride and groom to extend the time they choose to pay for. You're at a wedding, don't be on your phone 24/7. Why did you come? Do not disrupt the bride and groom's dinner. They've been up since 5 in the morning and taking pictures the entire day, greeting and not having any time to themselves. Be conscious of what you do and let them be peaceful for 20 minutes. Unless you're a professional singer and the bride and groom have asked you to sing. Don't ask for the mic. Don't ever ask for the mic. If you request a song and the DJ doesn't play it, chances are it's in the bride and groom's do not play list. There are other things, but this stuff is pretty basic. I feel applies to most brides and grooms as well as their guests. Take a nuclear crap in the bathroom of the bridal suite, where the newlyweds will spend their first night of married life together, an hour before the ceremony. Oh, and having a nap on the giant bed too, without making the sheets. My wife still hasn't forgiven you, Adam. This is exactly the reason why my fiance and I have told no one where we are staying for our first night. If you're the father of the bride, don't bring up in the speech that you thought your daughter was a lesbian for X amount of years. This happened at my so's cousin's wedding and was awkward for everyone in the vicinity. Don't call out the groom's mentally handicapped sister for not being dressing up. This happened at my wedding, and people didn't realize that it was just a battle to get her there in the first place because she doesn't like large crowds of people. A good chunk of our guests publicly shamed her for how she was dressed, and that ruined the whole event for my husband. If your sibling is getting married and you fly in for the wedding, do not refuse to take family pictures. You are family and you should take pictures. After you are forced to be and take pictures by your father who has to tell you to be part of the family, don't say the following: "That was torturous," or "I frickin' hate weddings," in front of your siblings' new in-laws. You will look like a brat and, no, unlike your father and mother, the new in-laws will not defend your behavior. And, finally, get off your goddamn phone. It looks really disrespectful in pictures. TLDR. Got married on Sunday and still was a brat. Luckily, the wedding was a huge success and she didn't ruin the day. Edit. To be clear, family pictures were before the ceremony and reception. If she didn't want to take pictures, she just didn't have to show. Edit 2. Wording. Edit 3. This just in, it seems my photographer was asked by her to take pictures of her and her aunt which are on my proof CD. So, yeah, not anxiety, just a brat. My brother-in-law didn't smile and looked downright unhappy in all of our photos. He was in his upper teens at the time and was in the wedding party. Good thing the saying about people not caring about their wedding photos after the fact was true for us, because any formal shots that included him are no good. Things I have actually seen happen. If you are one of the very few women invited to the bachelorette party, do not drunkenly admit that you had a giant crush on the groom for years during the roast. Groom had been with his bride that entire time. Do not attempt to invite random townies to your friend's wedding that you met the night before at the bachelorette party. Do not get so drunk during the reception that the bride needs to shuffle you onto the bus to get your butt home. Do not get so drunk that someone calls an ambulance for you. Give the groom a blowjob right before the ceremony, even if it's a good way for him to calm the frick down. Also, don't mention to the bride that you did it when you see her in the receiving line. Definitely not a good idea. Sounds like he made a great choice for his best man though. Do not empty out the gigantic hollowed out watermelon serving as a fruit buffet. Put it on your head and let a drunken fruit just smeared conga line around the entire reception room when the bride's party are basically Italian mafia and staring at you in abject loathing. They were just jealous of your sweetheart and awesome conga skills. Get drunk and tell the bride that the husband cheated on her when they were dating. Did not end well for me or the groom. Dang. This will probably get buried, but I am a wedding DJ, so I see people do stupid crap all the time. A few months ago I had a best man at a wedding give a toast. During the toast he was talking about how his brother the groom had found the best girl in the world. He goes on to say that we should all be jealous because none of us will find girls even close to how amazing the bride was. Keep in mind he is saying all of this with his girlfriend of 3 years right next to him. The girlfriend burst into tears. I cut the guy's mic off, and we quickly moved to cutting the cake. Needless to say, the poor girl dumped him about 30 minutes later. At another wedding for some very redneck people, they decided it would be a great idea to light a bonfire, seeing as though their wedding was in a barn. That day it happened to be very windy and the bonfire was right next to a hayfield. It took about 10 minutes before the field started to catch on fire. So like clockwork the fire department shows up. The guys at the wedding had been drinking moonshine for about 3 hours and one of them was stupid enough to drive. As the fire truck is coming down the driveway, the guy trying to leave hits the fire truck. Hilarity ensues. I promptly packed my crap and got out of there. 7/10 was a fun wedding. Roast the groom when you give a speech. That's what the stag was for. The wedding is a show, and everybody gets to pretend that the couple is perfect and the marriage is going to last. 1. Get drunk and knock over the wedding cake. Have seen this before, and it was just terrible. 2. Sing Mustang Sally because your distant relative who is in an white old man band. I don't know why people do this, but I've seen it 3x now. Nobody wants to hear you sing Mustang Sally. Not the couple, not the guests, and certainly not the band that does this for a living. 3. Have a cash bar. Stand up when they ask if anyone objects and yell out, "I do," then storm up the aisle, and as soon as you reach the bride and groom, turn around and yell, "Psych." In your first dance, hire ninjas to take your bride away and then fight them off with aimed low kicks, all with Mortal Kombat music playing overhead. Don't take a red-eye flight to the site of the wedding that arrives the day of the actual wedding. You will look like absolute death in all of the beautiful fancy photography, and you'll be so exhausted the whole evening that the kind photographer will contact you afterwards, making sure you aren't suffering from deep depression. Wedding musician here. The best cringe-worthy story was a gig where the bride was known as quite the lover that is finally settling down. The best man toast focused on this as she was proclaimed as unavailable. The men were encouraged to return the key to her apartment. Man after man, head down, went up and deposited a key in a hat. It didn't get weird until the end when an elderly man with a walker slowly went up after him. A very young boy bounced up to the astonishment of most of the gathering. That was over 18 years ago. I still remember it. This is an old well-known prank that people pull. The best man hands out keys before the toast for people to bring up. My grandfather stood up and announced 5 minutes before my parents' wedding that he was A, leaving my grandmother after 35 years, offerings B, marrying my grandmother's best friend after having had an affair with her for the past 8 years, and C, wanted to invite everyone to the wedding seeing as how everyone was already together and in one place for an easy announcement. Then my mother began walking down the aisle. So basically, don't do that. What's the one thing you regret doing for your wedding day? Not exactly a regret, but just a reminder to keep things in perspective. Looking at my grandmother's wedding photos, she pointed out her bridesmaids wearing matching hats. She remembered these hats were important and there was some big to do about them. For the life of her, she couldn't remember what exactly, and you certainly couldn't tell from the pictures. Just remember that when you're having heated debates over the correct shade of blue for the napkins. When we got married, I decided to let my bridesmaids wear whatever they wanted. My mum tried talking me into getting them matching dresses, saying the photos would look messy if they wore different things. I'm so glad I ignored her. Our photos look colorful, my friends looked amazing, and I saved a ton of money. Well, we could have had the wedding in fall 2019, but my wife wanted more time to make sure everything was perfect, so we decided to have it in April 2020. A reception line. I got talked into it. I didn't want to do it but felt pressured. All I did for 3/4 of my reception was stand and say hello to people. It was miserable and took a lot of the fun out of the day. Frickin' A. My wife's family insisted on it, and I was pretty ambivalent, so I went with it. By the time we got done with it, the food was all cold, guests had started to leave, etc. Not fricking worth it. Years later, we went to one where everyone went in, ate dinner, and then the bride and groom went table to table. That was why better. Letting the photographer dictate where we should be for the entire night. Going back, I would have told him do all the photo poses you want in the first hour, then leave us alone. Also would have had someone walk around with us when we said hi to each table to help us get out of drawn out conversations to make it go faster. Oh, that's a good one. About having someone break up the conversation at tables to move you along. Wearing heels. Also letting my sister-in-law convince me to stay at her house the night before instead of a hotel. I slept on a tiny, uncomfortable futon with my giant future husband, and slept maybe an hour. Yes, my wife's grandma was stunned she was spending the night before at our place and kept trying to get her to come sleep at her grandma's house on the couch, and my wife shot her down quick. Slept an hour bed the night before and got a good night's rest before a long butt day. Letting my ex-mill dictate pretty much everything. It stopped being our wedding and became her wedding, and she is crazy. The whole wedding was no longer focused on my wife and I, but my mill handing my wife off to me. Which is really ironic because after that moment Mill became even more controlling. Some things she did. She had a mommy-daughter dance, made an 30-minute long speech about raising my wife, including playing several inappropriate baby videos, made a toast to herself, cut the cake with my wife, tossed the bouquet herself, tried to outcast my small family, party of 6, to the corner, departed the wedding in our limo with us. This is the weirdest one. The bridal lingerie literally said mommy's girl. The wedding was ruined for me. The worst part? It set a precedent that my mill can do whatever she wanted in our relationship and my wife would always choose her side. This eventually caused a split after Mill spanked the heck out of my daughter and my wife took her side. It just kept getting worse with each bullet point. Letting a homeless guy into our reception venue to use the restroom. Half hour later, he's still in there. A few of my guests jimmied the door open and found him passed out on H. We had a homeless guy come into our wedding and was let in by the uppity wedding planner because he was wearing a Jack Daniels shirt and our minister family is named Jack Daniels. True story. He signed our wedding book, wish I was getting married, and then stole my bridesmaid's wallet in the aforementioned planner's car. So, you know, a memorable day. I regret not hiring a DJ. It's not only music, they help with the flow of the wedding. Flower toss, first dance, money dance, whatever you want. We cut corners where we could and that was one I regret. I wrote this in another comment, but a good DJ is important. A professional DJ know how to read the crowd and set the mood. You can have a playlist and try running it from a phone, but any DJ knows that no matter how you plan in advance how the audience will react, it never goes that way and you have to quickly switch it up. My husband and I went off alone to be married in the woods. No regrets on that, but I regret not going further off trail for the actual vow exchange. A lady on a horseback yelled at me that the white thing on your head is scaring my horse. That was the universe giving you a golden opportunity to tell someone frick you and the horse you rode in perfect context. I should have made my wife eat her meal. We sat at the table alone and chatted while everyone else was eating, and she said she wasn't very hungry after eating like 1/4 of her plate. Turns out that half hour was the only 30 minutes of the day she wasn't hungry. I finally went downstairs and got her a plate of hors d'oeuvres after her trying to politely sneak down for 2 hours. They spirited her food away some point after dinner and she still regrets not getting to eat the great food we picked out. Yes, same happened to me. Dang efficient catering workers. I turned my back for a second and my plates kept disappearing. I loved our baker and I was excited for months about the cake, only to get one bite of it on the day. In all honesty, I regret dancing so much. We danced so much, we forgot to go around to individually thank everyone for coming. They all came to us on the dance floor to say hello. 10/10 still dancing. I was a guest at a wedding where the bride and groom were glued to the dance floor, and I was so happy they were having fun and enjoying their day. Weddings are so often about what you're supposed to do, when really it should be your day to celebrate as you see fit. Tiny wedding in a beautiful state park. I forgot the rings in the car and my dad was kind enough to jog back and get them. That's the only regret I have for that day. I first read that a skate park. Getting separated from my wife while at the wedding. She went to the bathroom and then got swarmed by friends and family and she disappeared what seemed like hours. Also, in general getting pulled away from each other when I would get a drink or talk to someone. The reason I regret it is because my wife looked so absolutely stunning that day and I just wanted to look at her the entire time. My wife is still hot but something about that dress. This is one of the most romantic comments on this post. 3. Actually it's not doing something. My wife's uncle, as our wedding gift, hired the DJ. I wanted to talk to the DJ to make sure that he'd have the songs we wanted. Don't worry about it, he has everything, so I didn't. Don't get me wrong, he did a good job, it's just that he had every song but the couple that meant something to us. Getting a crappy photographer my mom recommended. Someone from her church. As we're taking pre-wedding pictures, part of the wedding picture package, I asked him during one of the breaks what got him into photography. He answered it's just something to do while I try to open my restaurant. That should have been the red flag. Same here and it sucks. It's hard to find someone decent that doesn't cost thousands of dollars. I opted for a $200 family friend and regret it to this day. Not eloping and leaving my mother-in-law in the dark. I could have had hair and makeup done, could have had the dress of my dreams, and may even have pictures on my walls from a day I loved. I had none of those things and it still hurts. Same here, but my mom and not my mill. We had a quickie courthouse ceremony because I didn't want her alcoholism to ruin a nice wedding, and she managed to ruin it. Anyway, no dress, no cake, pictures, nothing. The marriage turned out pretty great, though. I hope yours did, too. Not eloping. Our wedding was relatively small and inexpensive, less than 10k, less than 60 guests, but we could have spent that money on a sweet beach elopement and doubled up our honeymoon to be 2 weeks. I also regret not eloping and am relieved to see others do too. Neither of us was really into having a wedding, but we caved to family pressure and FOMO. Parts of it were fun, but lots were awkward and stressful and I think it was obvious that our hearts weren't in it. Having won, the marriage was enough for us but we were pressured into having a wedding. It was fine, I guess, but I wish we would have just gone on a better, longer honeymoon. My wife and I had a couple try and crash our wedding during the reception. Looking back I might have just let them stay. I wanted a small event for about 20 people. My fiancé agreed, but then her mom insisted they have a lot of very close and important family members. They just have to invite. So we agreed on a bigger wedding. But parents supposed to pay. We searched for a wedding venue and estimated a cost for 90 guests, less than 30 were from my side of the family, but everyone was happy about it, including me at this point. They all agreed for the costs except my mom, who was widowed for 10 years at this point and couldn't afford it, so I offered I'll cover her part myself. I was working abroad and sending most of my money to my future wife and let her organize everything and trusted with whatever she was doing with that money. A few months before the wedding was due and I came back to my country, I discovered my money covered the whole wedding. Her parents ghosted the subject. That marriage didn't hold up. I calculated how much money I've put into the wedding just because of my ex-mother-in-law's delusional thinking and I'm still goddamn mad at this waste of money. Also, only 20 members of my family showed up against 60 of hers. That totally had to be invited, and the ratio of money in the envelopes from both sides was still 50-50. I'm even more mad. Parents who try to control their kids' wedding make me mad. I get it. It's a special day for them too, but it's not their special day. I absolutely adored my wedding. If I would change one thing though, it would have been to hire a hair and makeup artist. My mill did my hair and it was fine and I did my own makeup and it was fine. But I wish I had just let myself spend that little bit extra on myself looking back. Even though we did get caught in the rain so it all would have been ruined the same either way, haha. Made for a fabulous waterfall photo though. My regret is having someone do my hair and makeup. I could have done a better more me job than the professional my mum knew. I thought it would feel nice and a bit luxurious if someone else did it, but it just felt plastic and weird. We did have an incredibly low cost outdoor wedding though, so the more done hair and makeup was really out of place. And the July heat didn't help it either. Stuffing cake in my wife's face. No exaggeration. I regret it to this day. One of the traits of a successful marriage is to protect your spouse. With words, with your actions. Protect in this case has the meaning of upholding their dignity, their honor, etc. Shoving cake in their face is not doing any of that and it's very public. Don't do it. Plus it messed with her makeup. I really wish I hadn't. Pro tip. My wife refused to let cake be smashed in her face. My family really wanted cake smashed in her face. They were calling out smash it, smash the cake, including my 11-year-old cousin. So I called him over, and I smashed it in his face. He loved it, my wife loved it, the crowd loved it. Pick a designated smushy. Folks, solves all problems. Posing for pictures. Ended up putting so much energy into getting perfect pics we didn't spend time in the moment. Just ask your photographer to do candid shots only and focus on enjoying the day. Your pics will be great whether you try hard to have perfect photos or not, and you won't look at the album nearly as often as you might think. We couldn't afford a wedding photographer at the time of the wedding, so we had candid photos from some nice friends. Then about a year later we had makeup wedding photos, and got all dressed up and tramped out into the woods with a professional. It really turned out great and so much fun. I would move speeches to before dinner is served. People are quicker when they're hungry and not drunk yet. I personally wouldn't bother with the first dance. We're not dancers. It was really freaking awkward. The one thing I would recommend to everyone is having party bombs, like mini indoor firework, and inside there's silly stuff to play with. We had groups of people from different places who didn't know each other. It was a brilliant icebreaker and so much fun. Well, not the wedding day precisely, but the next day. A. Frick Carnival cruises, and B. What idiot books their honeymoon travel requiring them to get up at 6 AM the day after the wedding? Oh wait, us. We're the idiots. Other than that, my wife is a phenomenal planner, so our only real regret day of, and after, was relying on other people for key points of transportation. My best man was an hour late picking me up. Unclench. I planned on being there hours early to help the vendors set up, so I wasn't anywhere close to late for the wedding. Then my parents were late getting us to the airport for our honeymoon flight, and we almost missed the flight and B. the bus to the cruise line because of delays. Shout out to the limo driver with the 1920s rolls who was driving my wife and the bridesmaids mill before the wedding, and the two of us after, though. He and the car were top notch. Things we did not regret: not overspending on flowers. Our florist was amazing at working within a fairly tight budget, giving her a dollar range and very general color theme instead of demanding specific flowers paid incredible dividends. She was able to build amazing displays that weren't very expensive at all and tied in beautifully to the venue. The only thing my wife really had her heart set on was mango calla lilies for her bridal bouquet, but we gave orange roses to the bridesmaids and everything looked brilliant. Getting the drink upgrade package. Venue specific, but the difference between full open bar versus 3 bottles of wine on each table and cash bar was like $3 per guest. Kind of a no-brainer. Venue. To each their own. But if you're near any kind of wine country, it's shocking how reasonable prices are for events. Competition in a free market occasionally does work for consumers. Rustic stacked stone barrel house with outdoor string lighting, full catering and the ambience of a vineyard in late September. All for about $10k all inclusive. Beat the heck out of the local golf courses, Elks Lodge, and other venues we looked at in terms of both absolute price and what we got for our money. A great DJ. Seriously, whoever DJs is going to be more than half of the time your guests remember. Get some personality and someone you can count on to lead the event. I had a slight advantage there since I used to work as an event DJ and hired the guy I used to work for. Friend as a photographer. He's a great artist when he's not passed out at the reception. I wish I had any photos worth keeping. See, friends make great backup photographers. I've taken some great photographs at weddings, but I'm glad it was never my job. I completely misread my spouse's playfulness and shoved cake into her face, going way up her nose. A decade later I can still hear the groans of disappointment from everyone nearby. I didn't do this because my dad gave me the advice not to. I'm glad I didn't. I regret not turning around to watch my wife walk down the aisle. It was an outdoor wedding with no music, and I was told to stare at the nearby ruins so I didn't accidentally see my wife as she made her way to the back of where we had the ceremony. With no cue, I had no idea when to turn until she tapped me on the shoulder and giggled a small hi. Her dress was amazing, and the ceremony went well amidst a surprise downpour, 2 hours earlier than expected, but I really wish I had been able to watch her walk the aisle. That's so sad. As a wedding photographer, one of the key shots of the ceremony is the groom's first look as the bride approaches the aisle. I'm sorry you didn't get more time to watch your beautiful bride. Thinking it was so important to get all of my family there. In retrospect, those that had to be convinced and accommodated shouldn't have been there. I didn't get to eat the hors d'oeuvres. I was so excited about them, especially the tiny beef Wellingtons. Was so busy taking pictures and then getting to the main course I forgot to get any. I also forgot to get drunk. I had maybe 1 or 2 drinks. It was such a busy day. I kinda wish I could have gone as a guest. I can blame Reddit for this one. Instead of individual party favors, we made a donation to a local animal rescue organization, and they then brought a puppy party, 2 puppies, already adopted, to the reception. I mentioned this on a wedding sub and people mobbed me about it, so I took all sorts of extra precautions about where they would be, told the photographer not to take any photos to discourage them being treated as props, etc. Mostly they were good steps, but I went overboard and I wish more people could have enjoyed their adorableness and raised awareness of the org. Reddit people will mob you just for doing anything, do not trust them. Having a cake because you have to have a cake. Our dinner was fairly late and came with dessert, and then an hour later there was cake that literally everyone was too full to eat. I dunno. This sounds like the perfect way to take the whole cake back for yourself and your partner. For some god unknown reason my mother recommended my dad and I dance to Sunrise, Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof. I was in a hurry and took her word for it. OMFG what I wouldn't give to just dance to literally anything but Longest Bus Song. I was visibly in pain. Woof, beautiful song, but it's so slow, it barely has a beat. That's a lot of awkward swaying. Making sure I said hi to everyone. I remember a table with my husband's aunt and cousin who I had never met, and as I walked past I realized later they were getting ready for me to come over and say hi. I had just got done walking away from my stepmom who was causing all kinds of drama, and it didn't dawn on me until later that I didn't make sure I said hi to them. It was a very small wedding and I said hi to a lot of them, but I know I missed a few and regret it. Oh, and ignoring all drama, I had an amazing night, but I should have ignored my stepmom and I should have made my maid of honor take a cab instead of being her DD on my wedding night. Allowing other people to decide who was invited. I was trying to be fair to everyone, but the list of people my husband was told he had to invite was enormous. We had a rather small venue, only able to accommodate 80 people, and that list took up more than half of that. I had to make cuts, which of course made me Bridezilla, but like, I'm sorry, your neighbor that I think is creepy and intrusive can't come. I regret not making a bigger stand though, because I'll look back at my pictures and there's so many people I still don't even know who they are. Several that I did but didn't want there in the first place, and so many missing that I wish I could have invited but didn't have a spot for. TBH, I regret my dress. It wasn't my favorite and I only got it cause it was priced for $150. I didn't have much money, so I cut costs where I thought would be fit and thought the dress should be cheap considering how I'd only wear it for one day. If I could do my wedding over again, I'd splurge to feel like a princess. On my final fitting day I sobbed because I hated it so much, but at that point, there was nothing I could do. Rushing through it, I had all the things we needed to do as a checklist in my brain and I was just going through checking them off instead of enjoying all the moments. Now I see pictures and remember the little moments. Thankful for a wonderful photographer who was also a friend, but I do wish I had done it at the time. Don't do the box cameras on the tables thing that you develop later. Be glad you have a camera in your hand at all times, instead of this disaster. We developed this pile of anonymous cameras, and to say we didn't expect what we saw would be an understatement. Invited everyone back to our new house to BBQ. Was exhausted after the wedding, then had to cook for 50 plus people who talked all night, wouldn't leave and trashed our house. The next day we cleaned all day long. Our families rarely get together, so we wanted to make it a big family thing. We have never done it again, lol. I will be reading through this list for sure. I'm recently engaged. We're not planning yet cause COVID, but we're definitely cutting things for money. It will be interesting to see what people who are already married felt was important on the day of. Then, I would say not giving more money for booze upfront because we ran out and my in-laws quietly added $2,000 to the bar tab during the reception, which I'm sure cut into their fun a bit. Now, the groom. I thought I wouldn't want it, but now I wish I had hired a videographer. My pictures are amazing, but I would have liked to be able to watch it. Getting married in a church. It was okay and didn't ruin our day at all. Both of our parents are Catholic, and it just made everything easier to make our parents happy. But it got weird when they asked us to promise to have children and we were like no. We had a ceremony that meant nothing to us, for our parents, and a reception for us after. Played pickup basketball with wedding guests the morning of. Played too competitively in like 90+ degree heat. Everyone who played was just too gassed to keep the party going late night. Not renting my wedding dress. What a huge waste of moai to look great for 2 hours. Besides, I had a boy so couldn't even pass it down. I sold my dress. I bought it knowing I was going to sell it, and so I splurged a little more on it than I originally planned. After selling it, I had paid only what I budgeted for it. Plus, the person who bought it sent me a picture from their wedding day and it was so wonderful to see that beautiful dress make another person's day. Not eloping. I just had a no-frills courthouse wedding. It did the job, but the magistrate was really serious. It might have been better it was some Elvis impersonator. My partner and I haven't really got any plans to get married, but if we are ever in Vegas, we are definitely doing that. Or a drive-through wedding. So wrong. It's right. Wedding photographers of Reddit. What's the shot you happen to catch that will never be released? I am currently on my way home from a wedding I shot, and I have a picture of the groom dipping the bride at the end of the first dance. Pretty religious couple. and the only shot I could get was straight down her dress. Will not let that see the light of day. Honestly, if you can find a super sneaky and subtle way to get that to the groom without even acknowledging it, I'm sure he'd be pumped. Even most pastors that I know would be happy to get a photo like that of their wives. I'm a videographer, not photographer. Haven't really gotten much visually speaking that's untoward. However, I do mic the groom immediately following the picture taking, so I don't have to track him down later. I've heard grooms urinating, giving themselves pep talks, and talking with the groomsmen about the bachelor party, where the groom did things that probably crossed a line, but not blatantly stepping over it. Or the pep talks must be adorable. I once worked an Indian wedding where there was some big feud between the groom's family and the bride's. The day starts out fairly peaceful, but a few hours into the reception, big massive brawl breaks out. Hundreds of guests were at this event, and a good solid 4 or 5 dozen began trading punches. Weirdly enough, it died down very quickly and the atmosphere lightened significantly. I think everyone seemed to get it out of their system, and they all began joking with each other. The police showed up and I got a great photo of the bride and groom in handcuffs, which everyone liked. Of course, that still didn't mean I could release a photo of Uncle Raj kicking an usher in the unmentionables while a little kid in the background was slinging samosas into the melee. What a word picture you paint with that last sentence. I was photographing a wedding about 4 years ago in the country. After the ceremony, we went to a friend of the couple's property to shoot the wedding party photos. It was a fairly nice day, however, there were a few moments where it would shower for a few minutes. We got some really cute romantic photos in the rain and plenty when the sun was shining. At one point the rain wouldn't stop, so the bridesmaids went from the location we were photographing at to under one of those canopy tents. I started taking some pics of the bridesmaids running in the rain when it happened. Just as they were getting under the tent, the weight of the water buildup from the rain caused the roof to dip and a waterfall of water came down, right on the main maid of honor's head. I just so happened to catch the exact moment that the water made contact with her head. It was one of my favorite shots I have done at a wedding. I ended up giving them a copy of that photo because it was just too epic, but they never shared it that I know of. Haha. I was shooting pictures at a friend's wedding. She was the bride, and she had a pretty good sense of humor about things and certain photos she wanted. She had me shoot several pics of her in her dressing room wearing nothing but a hose, gloves, heels, and veil while holding the bouquet as a special gift to her husband. As well, before heading to the reception, she pulled me and all of her bridesmaids into a room and had me shoot a few pics of all of them pulling their dress tops down showing their tee. My guess is that those weren't released to the general public. Sounds like a fun group. An entire wedding's worth of photos. Took wedding photos for free for a friend. 2 weeks later, just before I had the chance to unveil the wedding photos, it was revealed that the husband had been cheating on her all throughout their relationship prior to the wedding and soon after. The whole thing quickly dissolved and the wedding is naturally a very painful memory to my friend, so the pictures sit fully edited in my computer to this day. The good news is, my friend has since then met a wonderful man and is happily married. I didn't photograph that wedding because she had moved across the country by then, but they were beautiful. Usually it's photos where the speeches are so embarrassing to the bridegroom that they end up crying. If you're giving a speech, and you know it weeks in advance, hold your liquor until after you talk. Oh, and one time I photographed the wedding of 2 friends from college. The best man's speech was a subtle expression of his undying romantic love for the groom, though you'd really only pick up on that if you knew them. I withheld the photos of the other groomsmen looking right at my camera, mouths open and eyes wide in disbelief. Not me, so as wedding photographer. Groomsmen wore kilts. In the traditional manner, they decide to surprise the photographer with a bent over full Monty shot. Quite a graphic image of darkened butthole hair and hanging sausage and balls that will unfortunately never leave me. My sister does wedding photography. My favorite is when she caught the best man with a huge boner looking right at the bride's boobs. The best part was that the best man was the bride's cousin and the photo was the only group shot that had all the cousins in it. She spent hours having to look at this man's boner and Photoshop it out. Not a photographer, but ours caught a truly perfect moment. In the foreground, My wife and I are leaning towards each other to kiss in a lovely romantic gesture. Correction, I was leaning forward to kiss her hand, perfectly framing the bridesmaid in the background. The background, a lovely view of the small cove we're in, with one of the bridesmaids bent over to look at something in the tide pool, inadvertently mooning the camera. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Ama. Can we agree there need to be a sub where photographers post these crazy outtakes with the faces blurred or censored? Not technically photo, but I shot a crazy incident on video at an Indian wedding. If you know anything about Indian weddings, the bride has a tearful send-off with her family, and these send-offs include playful but long rituals involving coconuts, spiced water, and a horse and carriage in front of the wedding venue. These are usually very dramatic and tear-jerking. However, the hotel we were at was also hosting a business seminar at the same time, and its attendees got trapped behind the procession at the valet cul-de-sac. One of the drivers got into a screaming match to hurry the procession up with the bride's dad, and the bride's dad yelled back too, getting heated enough to slam his hands on the car's hood when the driver started honking and encroaching on the horse and carriage. The rest of the bride's family verbally and physically got into it, to the point of the driver nearly running over the bride's family at 5 miles per hour. In a panic, the bride yelled at the coachman to just drive off and appease the hotel guests. Cops eventually got involved. My camera was running the entire time capturing the incident. Me and the couple had a pretty good laugh about the whole incident afterwards, but there was silent acknowledgement that I would never put that clip in their final wedding video. Sounds like poor planning from the hotel tbh, and a valet driver being a little crap. I am not a photographer, but I am a wedding hair and makeup artist. At a wedding a couple of years ago, we were all getting ready upstairs at the bride's house. It was the last half an hour before leaving. The bride was getting ready and a bridesmaid popped back to me to get a last minuet touch up. She was wearing crazy high heels, and as she went to rush back down the stairs, she stumbled and literally fell butt over tit down this small staircase. For real, like a comedy fall. I saw her feet flying through the air, and as I rushed to see if she was okay, I looked down the stairs and the photographer is stood at the bottom with a look of horror on her face and her camera in her hands. Her instinct when she heard the scream was to start taking photos instead of rushing to the girl's aid. Luckily the bridesmaid was okay, other than a huge rug burn and baseball-sized swelling on her ankle. Photographer said the photos were amazing, but her guilt at not helping instead was greater. Our photographs. Groom cheated on bride 2 nights before the wedding with mob. Bride cancels wedding. Wedding gets uncancelled mostly due to mill pressure. Bride cries through entire ceremony. There were so many shots where she was so miserable I couldn't include them. I really hope she chopped his tongue off and dumped him a few months later. More than a decade ago, I was a professional photog. I took a photo of the mother of the bride sitting and talking with the sister of the bride. It was a cute scene. Back at the editing station, I realized that from the angle I'd been at, you could all the way up the mother's dress and see her undergarments. Out of decency, I deleted the file and made sure it wasn't saved in any backups. One of my best friends used to do wedding videos on the side for extra cash. He ended up doing the video for our other friend's wedding. She was 18 at the time and her husband was 31, but they started dating when she was 15. None of us liked him much at the time. Not a big deal now. I was hanging out with my friend while he was editing the video and he calls me over to hear a certain part. The couple had spoken with the pastor and my best friend Mike has forgotten to remove the groom's microphone. When the pastor left, apparently the groom pulled a flask out, which they promptly downed. The bride wasn't supposed to drink since her family didn't approve, so this was good in and of itself. But then the groom went to the bathroom, and my friend Mike had several long seconds of hearing the groom peeing. It was also strange for him to edit, because he had arranged their childhood pictures in chronological order and you see the groom going from a baby to a teenager before the first baby picture of the bride is shown. Photographed an old friend's wedding. Was trying to get some shots of the sunset over the hills as everything was wrapping up. As I turned to head back up to the reception, I took a few wider angle shots, and I got one of the groom getting some action from one of the bride's sisters just inside the tree line down the hill. It's blurry in the picture, but it's definitely clear that it's him. Lots and lots and lots of pictures where naughty bits get exposed due to poor outfit planning on the part of the drunk person dancing. I was helping a friend who is a wedding photographer, taking shots of everyone else at the wedding. Get to the signing of the register and my mate has a problem with his camera, so I take over for a few minutes. Bride and groom sitting at the table, signing the book. The groom, best man and ushers all wore kilts. I'd been paying attention to happy couple, but for a couple of photos I knelt down to get some more eye-level shots, and got a lovely set of the groom's testicles hanging out of his kilt. I didn't notice until I reviewed them later on the laptop. Bride and all her bridesmaids topless in a dome-like structure where they were hanging monkey bars style and swinging across the dome. The bride did get some of them. Bride who asked me to hand my camera to the maid of honor. They took several going from full nude to slipping into smoking hot lingerie. Yes, the bride got those too, but no one else. Groomsmen smoking weeds. Bride and groom smoking weeds. Guest snorting coke off a very busty girl's chest. And a convertible Mercedes, really nice one too, that rolled into a nearby creek. Tow truck showed up and I thought it would be funny to get some shots. The owner of the car basically attacked me. No one saw any of these. Had a girlfriend who thought she was a photographer. I helped her and we did a wedding. I wandered around to get casual action shots. Don't know if it's a thing or not, or she was just telling me to do some crazy butt thing she dreamed up. Anyways, end up out back where a bunch of groomsmen are smoking. Cool, these are the journalism shots I'm not being paid for. Go around a bend and see action in one of the cars. You know the kinda action. Figure what the frick, these people are stupid enough to bone literally feet from the building, they deserve some embarrassment. You can probably guess who I caught smoking some dude's pole in the car who was not the groom. I took like 20 pics though I'm not sure you could see much. They never noticed. I actually did it hoping they wouldn't, stopped short of banging on the window. Go back and find my girlfriend. Tell her exactly what I found and expressed what I think was the right level of disbelief cause she was freaking around literally at her own wedding. Girlfriend informs me that, yeah, I know she's banging that guy on the side. Pretty ballsy to do it at her own wedding though. Gave the girlfriend back the camera and left immediately. I wandered around to get casual action shots. Don't know if it's a thing or not, or she was just telling me to do some crazy butt thing she dreamed up. Candid shots is the phrase you're looking for. I've had the usual wardrobe malfunctions. No big deal. Either edit or remove from proofs. The one that I just can't delete is the photo of a bride getting ready in her bedroom. Beautiful moment between bride and her son. When I get back to edit, I realize that in the mirror of the shot is the bride's nasty skank daughter in the hall with her dress off and her hand between her thong and butthole. Ick, ick, ick. I'm not a photographer, but I was at a wedding a few years ago with my girlfriend, who was asked to take pictures for the night. At one stage, she showed me a picture of the bride with some of her friends. When you zoomed up on one of the girls, you could see that she had a good bit of white powder all around her nostril. I don't know how long she went around looking like that, but it was noticeable in a few different pictures, so most people she met must have known what she was up to. The couple were pretty innocent conservative as well, so it would have been quite a shock to them. Needless to say, those pictures didn't get sent to the bride and groom. I mean, it could have been setting powder. Some of the formulas show up bright white when not blended. I usually get a coochie shot every few weddings. Chicks in short dresses need to be wearing undies. You keep your goddamned opinions to yourself. Grooms at different weddings tend to smooch a lot of girls that they didn't just marry, in front of everyone, on the dance floor. I never know the relationship, so I never include the images. A guest passing out and fainting and being lifted out during reception. A random man drowning in a lake that the best man rescued. Groom's finger bleeding from a broken zipper on the bride's wedding dress. They decided to get ready together. And last, a video I shot as the videographer of a couple dirty dancing in the corner of the shot and the man visibly putting his hand somewhere. The song ending. Girl walks away and guy clearly has an awkward boner. Standing glass lanterns with real candles and drunken running equals groomsman on fire with a face covered in blood. We put him out relatively quickly, but he was missing a good chunk of his nose that had to be stitched up by a paramedic. We happened to be setting up for a shot and caught it all on video. As a photography at a wedding, I'm sad a shot didn't make the cut. It was chilly. I was facing forward and my boyfriend straddling the bench I was on. I snuggled in close to him for warmth and had my head against his chest. I know she took the shot. She whipped around ninja-like. The flash went off, and she kept moving. Maybe our expressions of surprise ruined the candid moment. Toying with the idea of asking if I can purchase it anyway. Ask? But the answer probably is that the photographer didn't nail the focus. We're not in the business of keeping gallery numbers down. Everything I've taken of a wedding goes up unless the shot is technically flawed or a duplicate. I shot an entire first dance not knowing there was a lady in a short dress squatting down in the background with no panties on. Sniz was on full display. I was able to crop her out, but the originals will stay in my spank bank, archives. Sniz is my new favorite word. While tossing the bouquet, a young bride's breast was bared when her sleeveless dress slipped. I never revealed that image to the bride and destroyed all of the digital copies. Not a formal photographer, but taking pictures of the bride, one of my best friends, and her bridesmaids, and when I developed them saw the groom, an utter shithead, with his hand up her 16yo sister's skirt while sitting on a wall behind them. Their marriage was doomed in my opinion anyway, so kept this secret. They divorced after less than 3 years when she came back a few days early from a work trip and found him in bed with a barely legal girl, so never needed to tell her, but I felt very guilty for those 3 years. If you don't know what this means, you are too young to be allowed on Reddit unsupervised. Husband and wife team here. Wife was shooting a bride throwing flower petals into the air. I was off taking candids of people. The bride threw the petals up. The top of her dress came down. Those pictures were quickly expelled. Haha. Flower petals. Bike pedals. I did video and backup photography for both of my cousins' weddings and got video of a bunch of drunken, white evangelicals dancing to Black or White with not a single black person present. The song quite literally points out that it don't matter. I shot a wedding last July and I was present when the bride and groom read private vows to each other. The moment was very intimate and emotional, and I'll never share it publicly. AWW, the only wholesome one so far. Not a specific moment that was caught, but my wife accidentally farted on our photographer when she was poofing up my wife's dress. I had a few shots of a groomsman jumping into a rescue shark tank, but they asked me to not publish them due to a pending lawsuit from the aquarium over a hefty fine. Although I was a wedding photog, the best wedding photo I have never seen was the one when my ex was walking down the aisle past me and we locked eyes. I heard the shutter and know he got it. One wedding I went to, there was an adorable kid. Got a few good photos. Then his guardians pulled me aside and very politely asked if I could avoid publishing any photos of him online because he was in the midst of some nasty custody situation. Now, I often post photos months or years after the fact, so I just went through my camera that second and deleted any with him. Sorry kiddo. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.